sweet ladies, you're welcome back to my channel. My name is Inka. So in today's tutorial we're going to be recreating this dress. So let's get started. So I'm going to be using this lace fabric. I'll be needing satin to line it and also cotton lining. Then also I'll be needing net, my zipper, hemming gum, and also interfacing. So let's get drafting. So first I'll fuse my stay on top of my lining. After that, I'll fold my fabric into two. I'm going to be cutting the upper part first. So I'll read my guideline, my armhole line, my nipple point, my underbust, and also my waist length with ½ inch seam allowance. Then I will extend the lines. So on the guideline, I'm going to be inputting my shoulder divided by 2. I'll also measure the same thing to the armhole line, and then I'll connect it into a straight line. After that, I'll measure 3 inches neck width, and I'll go to the tip of the shoulder. I'll drop the shoulder by 1, and then I'm going to connect these 2 points together. Then I'll add my seam allowance back to the shoulder slant. Then after that, from the 1 inch shoulder drop, I'm going to locate the midpoint to the armhole. Then I'm going to come in on that midpoint by ½ inch. Then I'm going to connect it back to the shoulder tip like so. Then I'll go to my nipple point, and then I'm going to input my nipple to nipple distance divided by 2 plus ½ inch seam allowance. Then I'll measure that same measurement on my underbust and also on my waist length. Then I'll roll it into a straight line. Then I'll also connect it from the nipple point to the mid armhole like so. I'm drafting a princess dart bustier. Alright, so I'll take my dart on both sides of the line. First on this side, I'm going to take ½ inch, and at the other side, I'm going to take 2 inches dart. And then after that, I'm just going to roll and connect it to the nipple point. So from the underbust, I'm going to use the cut part of the ruler to connect it to the nipple point like this. Then from the nipple point, I'm going to connect it to the armhole like this. You can measure 2 inches from where you have the mid armhole and then just connect it, but your French cuff will just give you that without stress. So then I will extend the line by 2 inches, and then I'll blend back the armhole cuff like so. I already have a detailed tutorial on how you can do this on the channel. I'm going to leave the link in the description box. Alright, so the next I'm going to do now is to input all my circumference measurements. So on the chest line, I'm going to input my bust measurement divided by 4 plus my seam allowance. Then you can just measure the distance of the darts that pass through that point and then put it back, and then you put your seam allowance. Then on the waistline, you input the waist circumference measurement divided by 4. Then you measure the distance between your darts, and then you replace it back, and then you put your seam allowance. After that, you connect the points together. Alright, so I'm going to be drafting the yoke now. For the yoke, I'm just going to connect from the mid armhole to the chest line this way. Yes, it's that simple. Alright, so I'm going to be measuring the neck width. For the neck width, I'm just going to be leaving just 2½ inch on the shoulder. So the rest will now be my neck width. Then for the neck depth, I'll just measure 3 inches, and then I'm going to connect the points together. So this is it. I'm going to go ahead and then I'm going to cut it out. So this is the yoke here. You're going to be cutting that part on the net. Alright, so I've fused the satin with stay, so I fold it into 2 as well. Then I place the pattern that I already drafted on the lining on top of it. I try as much as possible not to waste fabric, so I didn't allow the yoke parts to get into the line, into the satin too much, so that I can conserve some fabric, because you don't need the yoke part on the satin. All right, another thing I did was to measure 1 inch upward from the side seam, and then I blend it back to the dark leg like so. This is just to enable the dress to fit better. All right, so I went ahead and then I cut it out. So what I will be doing next is to cut this yoke part on the net. So I've folded my net. First you fold it into 2, then you check the direction of the stretch. That is very important. Then after that you fold it into 4, because we're going to be using the net to line each other, so you want it to be 2 pieces. All right, so you place the pattern of the yoke on top of the net, and then you are going to just add 1/2 inch to the bottom part of the yoke, and then you cut it out. All right, so I've cut out the yoke. You can see I added just 1/2 inch to the bottom part. This is how the other part looks. You're going to be combing the lace on top of the satin like this. All right, I'm done with the front. I'll be drafting the back. So I'll rule my guideline. Don't forget my fabric is folded into 2. Then I'll measure my armhole and then my waist length, and then I'm going to extend the line. Then I'll mark my zip allowance. I'm using 1.5 for my zip allowance, so I'll roll it into a straight line. Then I'll come in by 1/2 inch on the waistline and blend the zip allowance this way. This is just for the zip to relax very well at the back. Then you come in again from the beginning by 1/2 inch and then blend it like so. You measure your shoulder and then you roll the shoulder line straight to the chest line. All right, so you finish up the armhole by placing your French cuff, and then you're going to measure 3 inches neck width, and then you drop the shoulder by 1 inch, and then you connect the points together. And then don't forget to add your shoulder seam allowance. After that, you input all your circumference measurements, starting from the zip allowance. You put bust divided by 4 on the chest line with your allowance. Then on the waistline, you put waist circumference divided by 4 plus your seam allowance, and also your dart, because there will be dart on the waistline. Then you connect the points together. All right, so to input your dart, you measure your nipple to nipple distance starting from the center back, and then you roll it to the chest line. Then from the waistline, you're going to take 1/2 inch dart on both sides of that line, and then you blend it back to the chest line 1 inch before you get to the chest line. All right, so for the neck width, you're going to be leaving just 2.5 on the shoulder. The rest will be the neck width, and then you measure 1.5 downward. That is going to be the neck depth, and then you connect it. All right, so for the yoke, I'm going to measure 2 inches below the chest line, and I'm just going to connect it back to the armhole line like this. I'll just connect it back to the armhole line like this. That point there is just like 2 inches above the chest line on that armhole part, you can see. So that is my yoke. Let me measure the point for you so that you can see it very well. So from the shoulder, I have 7.5 inches. So next, I'm going to fold my satin into 2 again, and I'm going to place the back pattern on top of it. Then I'm going to just cut it out. All right, so I've cut it out. Don't forget to put your notches where necessary. All right, so I'm done putting my notches on the zip allowance part. You can see this is how it looks. So what you're going to do next, you're going to use the yoke to cut out the net. This is the yoke part. You use the yoke to cut out the net, and then you can see my satin is underneath the other part of the bodice. All right, so I'll keep that one aside. Then I'll just use the yoke to cut out the net. And for the allowance on the net, I only had 1/4 inch to this back part because you don't want any scallop to be at the back. Neck stretches, so that is what I usually do at the back of the yoke. I just had 1/4 inch maximum, and when I'm sewing, I sew the bodice with the yoke with that 1/4 inch, and that's it. It fits perfectly always. Alright, so don't forget to also pad the bust area for the front part. You can use wadding to do this, or you can use ST. In this particular one, I use my ST. I just cut out the ST and then about three layers, so I just tack it on top of each other and then I iron it. And don't forget to also gum the satin with the lace, because basically now the satin is serving as the main dress. So gum the satin with the lace. You can use pin to hold it if you don't want to use hemming gum, but hemming gum is easier, is better, and yeah, anything that makes my life easier, that's what I do. Okay, so just iron it in place and that's it. Alright, so moving on to the yoke. This is the front yoke. So this is the most interesting part of this tutorial. I love doing this because it brings out the creativity in me. Alright, so I first put my hemming gum, then after that I trim off some of the pattern on the lace fabric, then I just gum it on the yoke because I want it to form a beautiful design on the yoke. Initially I tried placing it in a different way, like maybe using the edge of the lace like you can see from this other side, but I didn't really get what I want, so I decided to just cut it into pieces, like just trim some of the pattern on the lace fabric and then I just gum on the net first with the hemming gum so that I can hold it in place, after which I just use my sewing machine to sew it down. There are several ways of doing this. If you like, you can just use your hoo-hoo gum or any of the fabric glue to gum these two together, but I like making stitches on it, like sewing it down, because it makes it durable, and yeah, I like it that way. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and cut out the one on the back part too. Alright, so last week when I posted how you can use the hemming gum to join the fabric and the lace together, I got a lot of questions on whether the hemming gum is not going to be showing white underneath the lace fabric. The hemming gum is not going to show because the iron will melt the hemming gum and the hemming gum will just disappear in between the fabric and the lace. So I'm trying to zoom it for you here so that you can see it. The hemming gum is not going to show. The answer is no, it's not going to show underneath the lace fabric. Okay, so at that moment, this is what I could come up with the back, though I later removed the lacy edge from the net. Let me show you. I later removed this part here. Moving on, we're going to be cutting the down part of the gown. You can see my fabric is already folded into 2, and then after that I fold it this way into 4, leaving about 7 inches zip allowance. It's not really zip allowance because I just wanted to have a little extension so that it can be easy for my client to walk, because there will be no slit and is a straight kind of thing, not pencil but just straight. So this is it. I also fold the lining and I place it on top of it. I ensure the center front, this is the center front on both the lining and the satin, I ensure they are on the same line because I like cutting it together. It makes it more accurate. And yes, so here I have extension of about 6.5 inches exactly, so that I can just connect it so that it can be easy for her to walk. So first I measure 1/2 inch downward, then I roll it. That 1/2 inch will just serve as my seam allowance for joining this skirt part to the upper body. So I place my waist length on top of that line, or you can just measure the remaining length of the gown. So I measured the hip line. I also measured the knee. My client is very tall. Her length is 68 inches, so I used 20 inches for her knee. I actually measured her and I used the measurement. Then after the knee, I measured the remaining length of the gown. I measured the remaining length of the gown because I'm working with the satin first here, so the length is 68, but I made it to be 67 so that the satin is not going to be showing underneath the lace fabric by the time I cut this pattern out on the lace fabric. Alright, so on the waistline, put the waist measurement divided by 4 plus 1 inch dart and then 2 inches seam allowance. On the hip line, I input the hip measurement divided by 4 plus 2 inches seam allowance. And then on the knee, whatever I have on the hip, I'm going to subtract 1 from it and I'm going to just put it on the knee. Then I'll move to the hem of the dress. Whatever I have on the hip line, I'm going to put exact same thing on the hem. I'm going to put exact same thing at the hem of the dress. And please note, all your measurements are starting from the folded edge. Alright. Which is actually tall. You can see the lining didn't get to that part where the satin is, so the lining is actually like 3 inches shorter than the satin, which is okay. And then the satin is 1 inch shorter than the main lace because I'm still going to be cutting this pattern out on the lace. Alright, so the next thing is just to connect all these your points together. Alright, so I'm done connecting it together and I'm going to be shaping this part here. So on the waistline, I'm going to measure 1 inch. And on the hip line, I'm going to measure 1.5 inch. And on the knee line, I'm going to measure just 1/2 inch. And then we are going to be connecting these points together. So from the waistline, you connect it to the hip line with your cuff. And then from the hip line, you connect it to the knee point with the straight part of the ruler, and then you connect it from the knee all the way down to the extension like so. Please kindly subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell. Alright, so this is how the pattern for the skirt looks like. The next thing now is to cut it out. Alright, so I've cut this out. What I'll do next is to put my notches. So I'm going to notch the center front and center back like this. Then after that, I'll mark the position of my dart and I'm going to notch it as well. So when you're done cutting, the next thing is to use the satin to trace out the lace. Don't forget, the lace is going to be 1 inch longer than the satin. The lace is going to be 1 inch longer than the satin. If you like, you can use any gum to join both the lace and the satin together, and if you like, you can pin both of them together before cutting it out. You can just do any one that is easy for you. So after cutting the satin out from the lace, you can see my lace is not getting to where I want. I had to cut additional one so that I'm going to be joining it to the down part. I used the lazy edge for it so that it's going to look very fine. Like I said, my client is really tall. For an average person, you don't have to join it. In fact, this is the first time I'm joining to the down part of lace fabric like this. Alright, so after joining it together, it's going to look like this. You can see the way it is. So the satin, the lace is 1 inch longer than the satin. All right, so we are going to be sewing our dress now, and I'm starting with the yoke part. So like I said earlier, I'm just going to be stitching the pattern that I cut out on top of the net, and being careful so that it's not going to scatter or messed up or something like that. So that's how you're going to do until you're done making your stitch on all the pattern that you cut out. All right, so the next thing you want to do now is to trim off the excess lace that is hanging on the net, and then you're going to now use the other net to turn the neckline. You know, because the net was folded into four, we have two pieces for the net, so you're going to be using one to line the other. So while trying to trim off the excess lace, please be careful not to cut your net. So that's it. When you're done with the net, you move on to the body. So I'm just going to join the panels together. You can see I've joined it together, and the next thing you do is to repeat the same step on the lining. Okay, so when you're done with the main fabric, you also repeat the same step to the lining. You join the panels together. All right, so I'm done with the lining. I've joined it together. So the next I'm going to do is to fix my breast cup inside the lining. All right, you can see I've put the breast cut inside the lining. The next step now is to join the yoke to the dress. Just join the yoke to the main body. First, you notch the midway on the neckline, and you also do the same thing to the net. Just put a small. And when you are done attaching the net to the main bodies, you will now use your lining to turn it. Just use the lining to turn it. So after using my lining to turn it, this is how it's looking from the wrong side. And then if you turn it to the right side, this is how it's looking. I love the detail on the neckline, you can see. So the next thing you do is to keep this one aside, and then you work on the back. So for the back, you are going to turn the yoke with the other net, and you are going to attach the yoke to the remaining part of the upper bodice. Don't forget to sew in your dart. Then after that, you are going to grab the skirt part, and then you are going to be joining the upper part with the skirt part. First, you join the lace together, and then you also join the lining together. So basically, you're joining lace to lace and then lining to lining. Like I said, don't forget to sew in your dart. I've sewn in my dart. All right, so I'm done joining the two pieces together. You also repeat the same thing to the second side of the back. And don't forget to also use the lining to turn the edge of the side seam and the zip allowance completely all the way down, just the way I'm showing you here, so that all the raw edges can be concealed. This is the front part. You will also use the lining to turn the side seam so that all the raw edges can be concealed. All right, so this is the front part. I'm done turning the edges with the lining. So don't forget to be ironing it as you sew. Iron the steps. So the next thing you're going to be doing now is to join the shoulders together, join back and front together on the shoulder, and then you fix your sleeve. But before then, I'm just going to measure 9 inches below the waistline on the back part, and I'll sew it close all the way down. Then after that, I will just fix my zip and finish the dress. All right, so that's the end of the class, and this is the outcome of the dress, and this is how it looks on my client. And if you'd like me to make a tutorial on how I made the down part, let me know in the comment section. If you have not subscribed to the channel yet, please kindly subscribe. Give this video a thumbs up if you loved the tutorial. And don't forget to leave a nice comment for me in the comment section. I'm going to definitely reply all the questions. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in my next tutorial. Bye.